How long does it take to get a pre-approval? Well, today we're going to take you through all the things you need to know about getting pre-approved, the pros, the cons, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Let's dive right in. Getting a home can be a life-changing experience, and it can be super fun and exciting, and it can also freak you out. It can be a really stressful time, and knowing how long stuff takes can help alleviate that stress, because how long is a piece of string? That's sometimes the response you get from people. So Nathan, how long does it take to get a pre-approval?
Well, today we're going to break down all the turnaround times between the broker and the bank and all the things that are important with the pre-approval. So Jayden, walk me through what a pre-approval is.
A pre-approval is an approval in principle from the bank. It's their indication of saying, yep, Nathan, we're happy to lend to you based on your income, based on your savings, based on all the information we're giving you, subject to you finding the right home. So it can be really handy when you're negotiating or looking for a property to have a pre-approval in hand, because at least you know what you're approved to, what your limit is, and if the bank's willing to give you money in the first place. We've covered off the pre-approval process in a bit more detail in a couple other videos, so check out them in the links below. All right, so Nathan, let's break down how long it takes to get a pre-approval approved. What are the timeframes and what are the milestones you should be looking out for?
So typically for a coffee shop pre-approval, it takes anywhere up to 3 days. Now, what we mean by a coffee shop pre-approval is it doesn't get validated by the bank. It's not looked at by anyone. It purely goes through a bank system. It gets credit checked and a letter spits out. So a coffee shop pre-approval takes up to 3 days to achieve. Now, they're really not worth the paper they're written on. We've talked about it before. If you're going to auction or you've got any critical timings that are coming up, the coffee shop pre-approval hasn't taken into account your savings, your pay slips. It's only looked at your credit file,
your budget and all that stuff. They haven't looked through your statements and seen if there's anything that they don't like. We had one the other day, Nathan, where our client had bought some baby formula for a friend, and on her statement it said baby food. The bank picked it up and said, whoa, wait a minute, do you have a baby that you haven't told us about? So it's all these little things that the banks can pick up at the moment that if you do the coffee shop pre-approval, yeah, sure, it's nice to know your credit file's fine, but they could come back and reject you later on for something like that, not disclosing that you've got a kid or maybe a debt that you forgot about. It's all that little stuff that can make a difference. So Nathan, if you're doing a real pre-approval, if you've got all your pay slips, your bank statements, all your docs together, you've given that to your broker to send through to the bank, what are the milestones from once the application gets submitted to the bank?
So typically what will happen is from start to finish, it takes about 1 to 2 weeks to get a pre-approval. When you send your application to the bank, it goes through an initial assessment in which they'll make sure you've given all the correct documentation that's required. If you're working with a broker, your broker will take care of all these details. If there's anything missing at this point in time, at the initial assessment, they'll let you know and say, hey, look, you forgot to give us a pay slip, this or that. So in the initial assessment, it's purely designed to make sure the correct documentation is provided to the bank.
Now, it's important to get this right the first time. We've seen cases that have, unfortunately, where people have gone direct to the bank or other brokers where you might be missing stuff. And while it might seem like a great idea just to get your application off and in the system to the bank, it's usually to your detriment, because the bank might see, well, Nathan forgot to tell me about his Afterpay or a GE interest-free credit card that he didn't declare, or there's a statement missing. And then that thing might be missing. They'll ask Nathan for another document. He'll send that back, but then they're gonna ask for more documents. And you end up in this infinite loop of going back and forth from the bank, and they keep asking for more and more info, and you never get your pre-approval finalized. So the way to solve that?
Typically is going slow. So slow is fast at the end of the day. So making sure that your broker checks all your information, it's all in order before you actually send it to the bank to complete the initial assessment.
All right, Nathan, so now they've completed the initial assessment, all the docs are on the file, it goes and sits on a credit manager's desk. Now, it might sound a bit old school, but that's kind of how it works. It sits in a digital queue waiting for someone to pick it up. They open up your file, they'll look at your statements and info, and what happens from there?
Effectively, the application is fully assessed. So the initial assessment, they're looking high level, making sure the right paperwork's there. The credit assessment is actually where the credit manager will go through each file, each document, look at your bank statements like Jayden said before. If they identify and see something that's wrong with your expenditure, they might ask questions at this point in time. So it is a full assessment, it is full blown, it is designed to ensure that all the right paperwork and questions are answered then and there. And then once that's completed, it moves up for the final assessment, which is signed off by higher credit.
Yeah, so when that credit manager is looking through your documents, they're checking for inconsistencies. They'll look for stuff like ABN on your pay slips. They'll make sure your pay year-to-date figure makes sense, that you've paid the right amount of tax, and that your savings are all in order, and that your accounts haven't been overdrawn, for example. These can be all things that can cause issues, so you'd hope your broker's checked out this stuff before, and if it is an issue, that's fine. Flag it with the bank up front and make sure that they're fine with that situation.
Now, typically your broker will write a memo to the bank, which is usually a one-pager that has all the details in which is relevant to your situation, and any things that are a little bit curly, explain. So for example, if you've had a late payment on your credit card, the reasonings behind that and why. Now, the credit manager looking at the application will actually read these loan notes and understand your specific circumstances, because they don't just look at you as a number and say yes, no, maybe. They actually look at the situation, understand your position based on the information provided by your broker, so that they can make an informed decision.
The last step, like Nathan said, is the final credit sign-off. Now, different banks have different systems. Sometimes in step 2, the credit manager can sign off then and there. Sometimes it has to go to a senior credit manager who double checks all the info and rubber stamps your deal and says, yeah, we're happy to give Nathan a pre-approval for $300,000 to buy his first home. All in all, like Nathan said initially, the process from once the application is sent to the bank to once it's pre-approved can take anywhere from between 7 to 14 days. So 1 to 2 weeks, roughly. If you sign a contract or if you've actually purchased a place, things get turned around a little bit quicker. But just keep in mind at different times of the year, like at Christmas time, Easter, when there's holidays, things can slow down. So just be prepared that it might take a little bit longer.
Now, understanding how banks look at your application and really understanding the process, you can see why you definitely want to make sure your application is fully assessed and not just going through a bank system and being coffee shop pre-approved.
So Nathan, give me 3 tips on how to speed up my home loan pre-approval.
So the first tip I'd say is get the documentation right first time. So banks will require credit cards, pay slips, afterpay. Make sure all this information is provided. Anything missing will be requested. The banks have access to live credit scores now, so they will see everything that is open.
Now, secondly, make sure your documents are up to date. Most banks will want your pay slips or your bank statements to have been from the last 30 days. If they're from 6 months ago, they're not really an accurate representation of what's happening today. So they will ask for more info. So if your broker asks for stuff from the last month or up until a certain date, make sure you get them that info, because it can just end up in that infinite loop and you're gonna get nowhere fast.
And the third tip is to make sure you get it right first time. What I mean by that is if you're going for a pre-approval and you say, yes, I'm gonna put down a 10% deposit, and then halfway through the pre-approval, you've already selected a bank, you're halfway through the process, mum comes to you and says, hey, look, I'll give you the other 10%, you'll have a 20% deposit. Well, then it might mean that you're gonna look at a completely different bank altogether. So it's important you get it right first time and you understand exactly how much deposit you're gonna be working with and what your maximum purchase price is gonna be. Because if you change your mind halfway through and you decide, no, I don't wanna buy for 500 anymore, I wanna buy for 600, it does change everything.
Yeah, the other thing that can really change is the type of property you're buying. So some banks, as we covered before a bunch of times, are great with apartments and really good with townhouses, but maybe not good with other stuff. So if you're looking at buying a townhouse, make sure your bank aligns with that. Or if you're looking at buying a house, make sure they're fine with that. Or if you're looking at building, make sure they're cool with that, because getting a pre-approval with a certain bank that doesn't do construction isn't gonna help you in the end. But that's it for today, guys. We hope you liked the video. If you need any help with finance or you got any questions, make sure you hit us up at huntergalloway.com.au.
If you liked today's video, please like and subscribe. And as always, thanks for watching.